Hello, my name is Roy Poyan. I'm the Director of Families Impacted by Opioids, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Fentanyl and Families in Harm's Way. Today we're going to take a look at the family as a system, and we're going to identify three learning objectives. The first is the functionality of the family member as individuals and their ability to function as a member of a family unit. The second is their potentiality, their potential to contribute what it is that they are offering the family inside the family dynamic. And the third are the obstacles. There are three. The three obstacles that are most likely and most common that interfere with the functionality and potentiality of a family member. What we first want to do is to identify that the family is a system. It's a system of intermoving parts, per se. Each part is an individual in the family dynamic. Family may be defined in a lot of different ways. We tend to think of it as a mother, a father, a sister, a brother, an aunt, an uncle, and grandparents. But it may also be that the family unit is defined as neighbors or a group. So it's up to the individual themselves to really determine who they see and act with as a family. When we look at a family as a system, we look at three different parts. One is that it's a unit. Two is that the unit functions as a system, meaning it has a certain way that they do what they do. And then the third is the dynamic. And the dynamic in the family is how well those different individuals work with each other, communicate with each other, share with each other. That's the dynamic of the family. So when we are considering some of the social science that's been developed over the years, we can look at one in particular by the term of homeostasis, which means balance. It basically identifies that the family is in constant seeking of balance. So when one part maybe doesn't contribute as much, someone else in the family steps up to fill that part that this person used to contribute. And that way balance is achieved. Although when it is imbalanced, and most families are, I mean, it's a difficult place to find yourself, and you rarely stay there. So it's always a moving dynamic, per se. But what's important for us in substance use disorders is to understand both before we experience the added substance use disorder to the family dynamic and during that time frame, there has been a family system. There is a family dynamic. There are individuals with functionality and potentiality. Although because of the substance use disorder being now a part of this, most of these get disrupted. And when they get disrupted, they have to change and they have to find their way of balancing themselves out. And what we mean by that is when a brother learns that his sister is misusing substances, that's very troubling for the brother. And they start to determine, what does this mean to me? And how will I contribute to the family, given that my sister is now behaving as we commonly see in someone who is misusing substances? And because that is so disruptive to the family, it's very likely that the brother is going to have to change some of what they do. So the question then becomes, how's the brother doing? I mean, we need to know this. We need to know this in the sense of, in seeking balance, we're going to try, naturally, we'll do it anyhow, we're going to try and find a way that the brother can find satisfaction, living as an individual who they are, contributing as a family member who they are, in a way that's productive. So we're going to look at each person in the family and their functionality, and we're also going to look at their potentiality. What is the potential of them being able to use their gifts, share with the family, communicate with the family? What's their potential? We know that they can do it, but are they willing to do it in this environment where substance use disorders is being included to the family dynamic? Let's take a stronger look at this, and to do that, gather together your study guide, your seminar workbook, your 3D coping skills workbook, and your connecting with the local resources workbook. And let's come together at the family table, and we'll take a closer look at this because it really is worth knowing Once you've written these things down in your workbooks, you'll have it as a source of record to refer back to as we move forward through the different episodes. So come on, let's move over to the family table and let's take a closer look at what all this means to you. I want to thank you for joining me here at the family table. This is a great opportunity for us to begin our learning together. There's so much to understand about a lifelong journey with a chronic disease, and that would be true regardless of what the disease is. But what we want to start to do is to take apart the individual pieces of this journey so that we can, number one, digest it, and number two, better understand how this is going to kind of play out in our lives. It's something that we can learn in advance, and that's the good news. The other good news is we pretty much know what you're going to go through as a family. And in this industry, being combined with other sub-industries, meaning addiction and all the services and programs that are available, being combined with both medical and psychological practices in terms of family therapy, there's just a sundry of areas that we can start to bring into our realm as a family once we understand what it is that we're dealing with. And in regards to understanding that, let's take a look at the study guide. The study guide allows us to introduce the learning topics. There will be 3 learning objectives in this seminar, but also there are 3 learning objectives for each of our episodes. And when we turn into the first part, what you will identify is that the 3 learning objectives for the families as a system is number 1, functionality, number 2, potentiality, and then number 3 is the obstacles that will likely play out in the family that interfere with our individual functionality and potentiality. Let's get started. So when we start to look at a family, we're looking at the family as a system. And then what we want to do is we want to identify the system as individuals. And then what we want to do is take a look at the individuals as being something in the area of functionality, both as an individual and functionality in terms of your contribution to the family and the decisions that are being made and the relationships that you have in the family. Also, the potential of our ability as an individual family member to contribute to the family dynamic. You see, the family is a system, and the system tries to always achieve balance. And if it's not in balance, it makes adjustments. So it's a very natural process for the family. Matter of fact, they've studied this, and they've come up with a term called homeostasis. So that's one of the areas that we want to make sure when we say we're a family, you should also be thinking we're a family constantly seeking balance. Now, we've had a chance to look at the 3 learning objectives, and we've identified functionality, potentiality, and the obstacles being 3, and that would be denial, enabling, and codependency. So we've got this formula that's kind of formed up, but the question is, what are we applying it to? Well, we've already said we're applying it to the family, which is a system. It's a family unit, and the family unit has a system, and there's a dynamic in how all the family members participate. So those are considered the relationships, the shared love, the caring inside of the family. Now, what we're going to start to do is to say, well, then what is a family? So when we're looking at what is a family, that gets defined by you as an individual. We could have the traditional family, a mother or father, heterosexual mother or father. We could have an extended family, which might be the grandparents. They may be our actual family. We could have an elected family where we're choosing these people to be considered, this is my family. We could have a gay and lesbian family. We could have grandparents as our family. We could have emancipated members as being our family. It's how we define it individually, and that's really what's stated in the study guide as we start to learn from the materials that are available to us. So now we've defined what a family is, and we've defined kind of a little bit about the structure of a family being a unit, and then the family has a system where the parts of the system work together for a homeostasis, a balance. And then we have the family dynamic, and that's kind of considered all the activities of the dinner table, of phone calls, of traveling, everything that happens in the family when you're working together and sharing, that's considered the dynamic. Well, why would we take time for all this discussion? The problem is that drug addiction stabs right in the middle of this, and it creates issues that normally would definitely not be there. But because it's addiction, it is, and it's not going away, and it's not going to get fixed. So for that reason, we have to figure out as individual family members, how are we going to deal with this? What do we do with this? We're not educated in this area. So what we want to start to do is we want to educate ourselves. We want to build knowledge. Without it, we're going to be frightened. It's our own ignorance, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but it's our lack of understanding of what's going on that's scaring us. So if we can gain knowledge about, well, what is this issue? Why is it happening, and how do I respond, and who's here to help me? Well, we're going to give you that, and that's the great part about what we're doing in this episode. So what we want to do is we want to figure out, how do I go about determining a solution, developing a decision, and designing a plan of action around this issue? Well, you might say, Roy, what's the issue? Well, that's what we're going to discuss now. And in the workbook for the Family Solution Finder Learning Series, we're going to turn to the page for the first seminar, The Family as a System, which is what we're discussing now, and we're going to start to answer questions. Now, go ahead and get this off of our website on the PDF download, or you can buy this book on Amazon.com, the Family Solution Finder Seminar Workbook, and that would be learning module number 2. And in that, you're going to have questions that you will address and thereby be able to make record of your answer ahead of time. Well, that's kind of convenient, because normally we don't do too many things in this particular addiction journey ahead of time. Well, you are here. Matter of fact, all of our episodes will be about you doing these things before they happen. You're going to be better prepared. You're going to be empowered. So let's take a look at some of the questions. In terms of the family and how you define it, on the first practical exercise, we're asking, take a moment to identify the members of your family. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So go ahead and list those people right now and write down, even if you just have a piece of paper, write down who in the family, Barbara, John, Alice, whoever you define as family. Then what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to say, what have you noticed? Regarding addiction in the family, what have you noticed? Write that down. I've noticed 1, 2, 3. And then what's the impact? How has this impacted you? Then in our second part of the question, we're going to get more specific. Let's talk about those people that we made a list on, their names. And let's break this down. We would like to be able to understand what is their functionality in terms of what do they have the ability to do in their life, and then functionality in the sense of what they're good at or not good at. How well can they contribute that? Are they functional in being able to sit there and say, well, I'm a bookkeeper in my profession, but the contribution that I'm going to make to the family system as part of the family dynamic is I'm going to help my family figure out how to pay for the treatment center and what kind of financing we're going to need, because that's kind of my functionality. So you can kind of see we each have something that we contribute to the family. And the question is what's happening to us with addiction impacting that ability? And here's what we mean. Take a mother, for an example, who might be experiencing severe depression. they would normally have certain things that they do in the family, but because of their severe depression and worrying about their child, they're not able to do those things. So in the sense of balance, now we're a little imbalanced. So let's say the other sister kind of steps up to the plate and says, Mom, I'll take care of the laundry, or I'll do the dishes, or I'll make sure that the other brother gets off to school on time. And they're kind of fulfilling what normally would have been done by, we see this a lot, by the other person. Now there's an imbalance because they take it away from themselves, but they're functional. So they're contributing that functionality in a way that's helpful to keep the family in balance. Are you kind of seeing the formulation of, this wouldn't be necessary if addiction wasn't the issue? But it's not the issue anymore. That's kind of a given. That's the way things are now. It's not going away and it's not going to get fixed. We're going to learn how to manage our lives around this, through this, and with this, but it's not going to go away. So the question then becomes, let's take a look at each individual family member and say, how are you doing? I mean, really, how are you doing? And so in the questions, we're going to weight that. We're going to give it like a numeric weight, a scale. And if you think that in the specific question that we're going to ask, and there's going to be about 5 questions, that you can sit there and say, all right, they're doing pretty good, or they're doing fair. If they're doing good, give them a 5. If they're doing fair, give them a 3. And if they're doing poorly, give them a 1. And be honest, have an understanding as to why you feel that way. Here's the first question. Are the mother and father able to address the issue? Regardless of what the issue is, are they able to address it? Give them a 5. They do a good job, okay? Give them a fair or give them a poor. So let's say the issue is enabling. And let's say the issue of enabling, because there's 10 types, you'll learn that later. Let's say the issue of enabling is type number 5, which is protecting the family image. Well, they need to stop doing that because that's enabling. But once again, you'll learn about that later. Now, if that's the issue, then how well are the mother and father, addressing that functionality-wise? And then what's their potentiality? Are they willing to do something about it if they are protecting the family image? I mean, once identified, where somebody might say, listen, I think you're protecting the family image and that's enabling Bob to continue to misuse drugs, then are they willing to do something about it? That's their potentiality. So now they have a functionality, meaning, yes, they are able to stop doing that. Their potential to make that change is what's limited. They're not willing to make that change because they don't want to be embarrassed in the community by not protecting the family image. And that's just one of many examples, whatever issue it is that you're dealing with. The next question is the parents to the other siblings. How functional are the parents in dealing with these issues as it relates to the other siblings, not the one that's misusing, but those other family members? How well are they doing with that? And then the third question is, are the parents and siblings to the person, meaning is the other family members and the parents, how well are they dealing in their functionality of the person who's misusing substances? See how we're breaking this all down based off of functionality and their potential to make change or potential to make a contribution of that functionality. The parents and siblings to those who are outside the family. How well does the family communicate with those who are outside the family? So now take your score and see how well you did. We also recommend a YouTube video, and you'll find on our YouTube channel about 130 videos that support all of our presentations. The YouTube video allows us to take a look at the rules that govern a family, because this has been studied extensively. Empirically proven studies and articles have been written on just this topic. So where does this leave us? Well, we now know functionality, potentiality, and we've taken a look at the 3 most common obstacles that interfere with functionality and potentiality, and those are the denial, enabling, and codependency. So we've taken that and we've applied it to each individual family member. Oh, that's nice, but it doesn't really take us anywhere. I mean, all I've done is the equivalent of 27 slides in the basement of a church. There's donuts in the back of the room and I'll talk to you. You really don't have an awful lot of information to work with yet. Not until you've determined what you're going to do with this information are you truly empowered. Just being knowledgeable and not acting on it doesn't make a lot of sense. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at how do we as a family or an individual inside the family system, create the dynamic. How do you determine a solution? You may be like me. I was never taught how to determine a solution. I mean, my time in the Army, I was a field artillery captain. You really did learn the science of making good decisions. A lot of people's lives counted on it. And then, but there is a way, and we're going to show you a way that you can now do that. The other area is in the area of developing a decision. Well, we make decisions like this. Yeah, but these decisions really matter. You need to make sure you're going to get your decision right. So there's a model that you can answer 6 questions, and with the model structure, you're going to make a sound decision. Whether it's the right decision or not, I don't know. You might make a sound decision or the wrong decision, but at least it's going to be a sound decision, and you're going to know how you got there, which is kind of good, because if you'd made a mistake, you can go back into the decision and say, I think we collected the information for the wrong person, which guided us towards making the wrong decision. Anyhow, so with that in mind, the next step is you got to act on it. You've got a solution, you've got a decision based on the solution, you got to act on it. You got to design a plan of action. These are called the 3 Ds because you're determining a solution, you're developing a decision, and you're designing a plan of action. In the plan of action, you're going to assign responsibilities. Who's going to do what? It may be that one person calls up the HMO to determine where family therapists are located and what benefits are actually paid for and how much do we have to pay out of pocket. Other tasks might be we need to coordinate that all the family members come to the meeting, or Jerry shows up to the meeting because that's the person that's doing a specific type of enabling, and they need to make that change. So the plan of action then becomes a recorded opportunity for all to share in, and you can set this up ahead of time. All of this can be done in advance, or you can wait until it's happening, or you can take a look back on how do we get here, and then use this to determine kind of a forensic review of what happened and why did it happen, so we don't do it again. You can certainly do it that way. So now we know how to determine a solution, develop a decision, and design a plan of action. And the book that we used to do that was the 3D Coping Skills book, Learning Module number 3. And what this allows you to do is to go to that specific seminar and then answer the questions. It also allows you to record the information so that you can use it as a reference in the future. What we want to do now is to take all of these parts that we've discussed in today's episode, the family as a system, and put it together and go out into the community as consumers and find the right level of care and treatment or plans that can help us to effectively address how we have designed our response. So we've got the learning objectives that went into the impact to the family, learning module number 2, that went into determining a solution, developing a decision, and designing a plan of action, which we can now act on, which is really a great place to be. And now we're going out into the community because no man is an island, and we're going to find those resources in our community that can help us. And in order to properly organize that, we will use our 4th learning module book, which is Connecting with Resources. The Family Solution Finder Local Resource Connections Workbook. And in that, we will then turn to the proper location, which in this case is the Family as a System, and then enter in the information that we're gathering. This kind of becomes your telephone book with a lot more. It's better than a Google because you have done it locally, and you will have actually contacted these people in advance. Okay, what does that mean? Well, if you have a loved one that's dealing with addiction, and this has been going on for some time now, you're probably going to end up in drug court or criminal court. you're going to need a lawyer. You might as well try and look for one now, because when this is all happening, it's a terrible time to go out and try and find a lawyer. You need to know what their retainer fees are, what kind of information they need. So all of this can be done in advance, is what we're saying. Same thing for the police. The police will probably show up at some point and intervene in your lives. It would be a good idea for you to fill out the information that they're going to need. We, in the Learning Center section for these episodes, the police is an intervention, you'll actually learn to fill out a missing persons report in advance. See, when we are looking at this kind of trauma to the family, and it is traumatic, we can actually take steps now to become knowledgeable. Knowledge is empowering, but it doesn't become empowerment, meaning it's just yours up to that point. It doesn't become empowerment until you start to include others, until you start to act on it. That's where we want you. We want the American family to get ready for this, if they're not already in it, because it is very possible that you are in harm's way, and there's something you can do about it, and by listening and viewing and taking the time to complete these exercises, you are going to help yourself to get out of harm's way. Families conquering addiction is based around knowledge. Ignorance is the drug addiction industry's best friend. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to view this, and I hope to see you on our next episode of Fentanyl and Families in Harm's Way. Hello, I want to thank you for continuing to view our episode, and we're now going to work into the area of the 3Ds. This is an important characteristic for the family to develop skills in, and we'll start by taking the time to look at an issue and then determine the issues based on the area of determining a solution, developing a decision, and designing a plan of action. By using your Module 3 workbook and going to a specific issue, you'll be able to find that the first step in that 3D skill set is the FTR, the Family Transformational Model. And the Family Transformational Model is a set-up way, each time the same way, that we will take 5 categories to look at in determining a solution. And each category is going to have 3 questions. So let's get started. The first is to define the issue. Naturally, we'll want to know what the issue is. The word issue is really problem, but we're saying the word issue is, the reason we're saying the word issue is it's just a little bit easier to digest, because it's not always a problem. Sometimes it's just something that's happening, and we need to determine a solution to it. The next question is, how does the issue impact the family? We need to know that. We need to know, we have an issue, that's fine. The issues can exist, but if it's impacting the family, in what way is it impacting the family? And then what steps can the family take to prepare and then respond to the issue? That's very important for us to know. The fact is that this issue exists and it's impacting the family. We tend to believe maybe there was something we could have done to kind of get ready for it. And if there was, then we would want to have taken those steps, which is what all these episodes are about. And then who can help assist us and the family in our response? So we want to start to ask ourselves, we know that there's an issue, we know that it's impacting the family, and there are things that we could do to prepare for this, but we're probably going to need a resource, information, another person outside of our family, or maybe one of our family members specifically can use their functionality and contribute. So we want to identify that. And then what should the family expect as their outcome? And kind of a start with the end in mind thought, where we're saying, if we're going to do something, it's going to result in something. So is that result desirable? Is that really what we want? Because if we're going to create a solution, then we want the solution's outcome to be what we expect it would be. So in each of these categories that I just described, 1 through 5, there are 3 questions, and we're going to ask ourselves each of these. Let's go back into the first category, define the issue. Clearly state what happened or what will happen. We want to know very clearly what happened or what's likely to happen. And then write that down. Identify who's involved or who should be involved, and then what would you like to have happen or like to see happen. The third question in every category is going to be used. You'll see how in just a minute. But just remember, the third question in every category, so this question right here, the way you answer it, will be reused. Now the next question is, how is the issue impacting the family? Who in the family exactly is impacted? In what way are they impacted? And then the third question is, what is needed to move forward? And then the third category is, what steps can the family take to prepare and then respond to the issue? The 3 questions again. What needs to be done? And then prioritize that list. Who needs to be involved? And then what will it look like, the third question, what will it look like when completed? Then the 4th category is, who can help and assist the family in their response? The 3 questions are, how to search and organize this organization to help you. In other words, it's not enough that you know you're going to go and introduce yourselves to a treatment center in your community. You want to start to determine, how do I look for them and organize my way of seeking help, because it might not just be that group alone. You may also need other services to kind of start to create a who can assist us. And it may be many different types of people. What to ask from them, and then what to expect. Remember the third question, what to expect. And then the 5th category is, what should the family expect as their outcome? Well, that has to do a lot with timing. And if it takes a certain amount of time, let's be realistic of what that is. That has something to do with the expense of the involvement, of getting involved in this issue. And then the third question being, required changes, our changes as family members, for this response to successfully take place. Now, let's state what our solution is. Hey, this is the great news. You've already developed your solution. By answering each of these 3 questions, the third question in every category, you'll pull forward now into your statement. So your first sentence of your statement is the third answer in the first category. What would you like to have happen or like to see happen? Well, that becomes your first sentence. So what your first sentence for your solution statement is, what we would like to see happen is, and you just pull your answer from there to here. Do the same thing with the second category. How does the issue impact the family? Using the third question's answer, what is needed for the family to move forward? So now your second sentence is, what's needed to move forward is. And now you're accumulating these answers from these categories, the third question, and it's actually becoming your first sentence, your second sentence, your third sentence, your fourth sentence, and your 5th sentence in your solution statement.
So your solution statement is going to sound something like, what we would like to see happen is, and what's needed to move forward will be, and then the third question from the third category, what it will look like when completed will be, and then what we expect will be, and then what's required for us to have a successful response is. Now those are your 5 sentences. You've just constructed your solution. And this is how you go about using a model for creating a solution. For any issue in life you have to face, you can use this as a way of approaching it. Now let's go to the other area, which is the second coping skill, making a decision. Let's make a value-based decision. Let's make a decision each time that kind of balances with what we value most. So first we want to determine what are our values. Well, the best way to do that is to write down on a piece of paper, what types of things do you as an individual value most? And each member of your family can do this in a kind of a group exercise. And then once you've done that, I value love, I value honesty, I value relationships and sharing. These could all be an individual's 1, 2, 3. Then prioritize them. Which of the 1, 2, 3 is most important? Then have each member of the family do the same thing. And then you can sit there and say to the family, what was your number 1? What was your number 2? What was your number 1? What was your number 1? What was your number 1? And then what was your 2? What was your 2? What was your 3? What was your 3? And where you start to see many people in the family say, well, my number 1 is relationships, my number 2 was trust, and my number 3 was love. Well, then you talk to another person, they say, well, my number 1 was love, my number 2 was personal expression or confidentiality, or so they mentioned something different, but they did mention love. And then the third member of the family happens to mention love also. You know now that love is a value of the family. So whatever decisions you make, you want to balance it on the fact of, does this disrupt our values? If it does, at least you know that it does, and to what degree. You're calculating that. But at least also you're including, what do we value most? Let's make sure our decisions don't counter that. And now, in the first step, we're going to identify exactly what's happened. And this is, by the way, in your book, okay? And it is for each of the episodes. Now, identify exactly what's happened, what happened, how did it happen, who did it happen to. Then the second step is analyze the situation, assess the problem, identify the problem, and in what areas did the problem create an impact. You're writing all of these down. The third step of that the third step in the decision-making model is, what is the number of one contributing factor? What is causing this issue to take place? You need to know that before you make a decision. The fourth step is, now that you know the number one factor, you need to go out and find out what information there is about this. Your primary source, you're going to go to the actual person or organization that's involved with this and ask them, what is this issue, and help us to understand it better. The secondary source would be, somebody's telling you this happened, or somebody suggests that you should do something a certain way, and it's coming from somebody else other than the primary source. It could be an article, a clinical paper. These are all secondary sources, and you gather them and you make them part of your primary, secondary information gathering. The third area that you look at is your gut. What does your gut, because that's often where our faith comes in, and other things that are very important when making decisions get included. So trust your gut is what we're saying in the decision-making process. The fifth step in making a good quality decision is where you're taking a criteria and saying, let's take what we're going to make a decision about and let's balance it on the criteria to make sure that we're covering all of our bases. And this will ensure safety of your loved one. Is safety a part of what's being considered? And do we have the resources that are needed to do the decision we're looking at? And then, do we understand the timetable? Is it realistic? And do we understand the negative impacts? Because every decision has a positive and negative. Well, identify what the negative outcomes might be so that you can weight the factor of, is this a good decision? And then would you do this if, would you ask others to do this if they were doing it for you? Meaning it was done for you or to you. Is this still a good decision? These are all areas that you want to take a look at. The third coping skill is in the area of the family plan of action. And everybody could say, well, Roy, listen, we're just going to go out and do it. Well, it's going to get done a lot more effectively. I want to warn you that the addiction industry is not organized. And then again, either is the family. So you're taking two disorganized organizations and you're putting them together. So a plan is a very good idea. The other factor is you're going to more than likely require the assistance of a lot of different groups. And as time goes by, those groups are going to change. And now it's a whole new set of groups that you're dealing with. When you're at the hospital, the ER, that's what that is. Then you move over to detox, that's what that is. Then you move over to therapy and treatment, and that lasts for 16 weeks. That's what that is. Then you're looking at sober living, recovery, maybe incarceration, and then reentry. On all that's involved in that. So there's all sorts of reasons why a plan put on paper based on the decision and the information gathering that you've made based on the solution that you know you want to use are very good ideas. It all comes together with the plan of action. Then you take the plan of action and you go find a professional to help you. Everything that we've done up to now is to position you to a place where you can be properly assisted and directed and supported. This is what's often missing in the families. This is what exhausts the families. This is where the families get into fights internally on. So, for that reason, we're going to apply the 3D coping skills. Determine a solution. We're going to develop a decision, and we're going to design a plan of action. And we're going to do it each time. I hope this is helpful for you. I'm confident it will be.